In this video, I'm going to tell you about one of the most mysterious and terrifying crimes that took place more than 100 years ago on a farm in Germany. The story includes real photos from the crime scene and heartbreaking details about the killer who lived in the attic of the house. So get as comfortable as possible. Like this video, because it's important for the channel's growth. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other interesting stories. For years, people living near the small Bavarian village of Weidhofen avoided walking near the Hinterkaifeck farm after dark. Not because of ghosts, not because of old superstitions, but because of what happened there in the spring of 1922. Even now, more than a century later, the murders at Hinterkaifeck are considered one of the most terrifying crimes in German history. And the deeper investigators looked into the case, the darker the story became. Because this wasn't just a murder scene. It was a nightmare that appeared to begin days before anyone died. The Hinterkaifeck farm stood isolated in the countryside, roughly 70 kilometers north of Munich, surrounded by forests and open fields. The nearest neighbors lived far enough away that screams at night likely would have gone unheard. The farm belonged to the Gruber family. At the head of the household was 63-year-old Andreas Gruber. Locals described him as aggressive, paranoid, and difficult to deal with. He had a violent temper and rarely smiled. Living with him was his 72-year-old wife, Cecilia Gruber. Also inside the farmhouse was their widowed daughter, 35-year-old Victoria Gabriel, and Victoria's two children, 7-year-old Cecilia Gabriel and 2-year-old Joseph. The family also employed a maid whenever they could find one willing to stay at the property. But that had become increasingly difficult, because strange things had already started happening at Hinterkaifeck long before the murders. Months earlier, the family's former maid abruptly quit. She later told neighbors she believed the farmhouse was haunted. At night, she claimed she heard footsteps coming from the attic above the bedrooms. Slow pacing, sometimes dragging sounds. Other nights, faint whispering. The noises frightened her badly enough that she eventually refused to sleep there another night. Most people laughed off her story. But then Andreas Gruber himself started noticing disturbing things around the farm. A few days before the murders, he discovered footprints in the snow leading from the nearby forest toward the farmhouse. He followed the tracks carefully. They led directly to the property, but there were no footprints leading away. Whoever walked to Hinterkaifeck never seemed to leave. Andreas searched the barn, the sheds, and eventually the attic. He claimed he found nobody. Still, the unsettling incidents continued. A ring of house keys disappeared. Then Andreas discovered a newspaper inside the home that nobody recognized. The family didn't subscribe to it. No neighbors admitted bringing it there. Around the same time, Andreas once again heard movement in the attic late at night. Heavy footsteps directly above the bedrooms. Back and forth. Back and forth. As though someone was walking slowly through the darkness overhead, while the family slept beneath them. But despite all of this, life at Hinterkaifeck continued. On March 31st, 1922, a new maid arrived at the farm. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old and had only begun working there that same day. Her sister reportedly walked her to the property that afternoon. Neither woman could have imagined what would happen before morning. That night, neighbors later recalled hearing the Gruber's dog barking aggressively for hours. Then suddenly, silence. Over the next several days, nobody saw the family. But strangely, the farm itself didn't appear abandoned. Smoke continued rising from the chimney. The cattle were still being fed. Someone appeared to be moving around the property at night. One local man later told police that while walking near the farm after dark, he noticed the furnace inside the house glowing. As he looked toward the farmhouse, he suddenly saw a person standing near the building holding a lantern. The figure turned and pointed the bright light directly at him, temporarily blinding him. The witness immediately became frightened and left the area. At the time, he assumed it was Andreas. Later, he realized the family may already have been dead. By April 4th, concern finally grew serious enough that several neighbors entered the property themselves. What they found inside shocked all of Germany. Inside the barn, hidden beneath piles of hay, lay 4 bodies. 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, 72-year-old Cecilia Gruber, 35-year-old Victoria Gabriel, and little 7-year-old Cecilia. All 4 had been brutally murdered. Investigators believed the killer used a mattock, a farming tool with a heavy metal head similar to a pickaxe. The victims had suffered devastating blows to the skull. Evidence suggested the killer may have lured them into the barn one by one before attacking them individually. As police continued searching the farmhouse, they discovered the body of Maria Baumgartner in her bed. The maid had likely been killed shortly after arriving at the property. Then officers entered the children's bedroom. Inside his crib lay 2-year-old Joseph, dead. The entire family had been exterminated in a single night. But the horror became even worse once investigators examined the farmhouse more carefully, because someone had clearly continued living there after the murders. Fresh bread had been sliced and eaten. Meat from the pantry had been prepared. Meals were partially consumed inside the kitchen. The cattle had been fed regularly. Water buckets had been refilled. And smoke continued rising from the chimney because someone had actively maintained the furnace and fires inside the home. Whoever committed the murders stayed at Hinterkaifeck for several days, surrounded by the bodies of their victims. Sleeping there, cooking there, walking through the silent farmhouse at night completely unnoticed. Police launched a massive investigation, and almost immediately, suspicion fell on multiple groups. At first, authorities considered wandering beggars and drifters who had reportedly been seen traveling through nearby villages around the time of the murders. Others suspected traveling craftsmen and handymen who occasionally worked in the region. Several itinerant workers were questioned extensively, but no evidence tied them directly to the crime. Then investigators discovered something strange. A significant amount of money had been left untouched inside the farmhouse. More than 1,700 gold marks were reportedly found hidden inside the home. If robbery had been the motive, why leave the money behind? This changed the entire direction of the investigation. The murders suddenly appeared deeply personal. Attention soon shifted toward a local neighbor named Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Lorenz was a farmer from the nearby village and had known Victoria for years. In fact, many locals believed he had been romantically involved with her. Some even suspected Lorenz might be the biological father of little Joseph. But what truly alarmed investigators was Lorenz's behavior after the bodies were discovered. Witnesses claimed he appeared unusually calm at the crime scene. Even stranger, he reportedly moved several bodies before police arrived. At one point, he allegedly entered the farmhouse alone, despite fears the killer might still be inside. Some investigators believed he seemed too familiar with the scene. Rumors spread quickly throughout the village. People whispered that Lorenz may have killed the family out of jealousy, rage, or disputes involving Joseph. For years, many locals became convinced he was responsible. But then the investigation uncovered something even darker. Authorities learned that years before the murders, Andreas Gruber and his daughter Victoria had been investigated for incest. The rumors had circulated quietly through the village for a long time, but police records confirmed that both had previously faced legal trouble connected to an inappropriate relationship. Suddenly, horrifying new theories emerged. Investigators began suspecting that Andreas Gruber himself, not Lorenz Schlittenbauer, may have actually been Josef's biological father. If true, It completely changed the family dynamic inside Hinterkaifeck. Some investigators believed the tension surrounding Victoria, Joseph, and the identity of the child's father may have played a role in the murders themselves. But again, nothing could ever be proven conclusively. As the years passed, police continued chasing leads. Dozens of suspects were questioned. Former soldiers, travelers, neighbors, workers, even possible serial offenders. At one point, investigators found a pocket knife believed to possibly belong to the killer. The murder weapon, the mattock, was eventually discovered hidden beneath floorboards in the farm itself. This discovery terrified investigators because it confirmed the killer likely remained inside the farmhouse after the murders long enough to conceal evidence. Still, despite years of investigation, the mystery only deepened. In 1923, less than a year after the murders, the Hinterkaifeck farmhouse was demolished. Many locals believed the property had become cursed. The original buildings no longer exist today. But near the former location of the farm, a small memorial monument was later erected to honor the 6 victims murdered there. Even now, visitors still travel to the isolated area, searching for traces of the infamous crime. And many claim the atmosphere around the old property feels deeply unsettling after dark. For decades, investigators continued reopening the case, hoping new evidence might finally reveal the killer. But every theory eventually collapsed under scrutiny. The wandering beggars, the craftsman, the jealous neighbor. A hidden intruder living in the attic. Someone connected personally to Victoria. Or perhaps somebody else entirely. Nobody could ever prove what truly happened inside Hinterkaifeck. Finally, in 1955, German authorities officially closed the investigation. No one was charged. No killer was ever identified. And one of the most horrifying murder mysteries in history became permanently unsolved. But what still terrifies people today isn't just the violence. It's the thought that the family may have sensed the danger long before the murders happened. The footsteps in the attic, the missing keys, the footprints in the snow leading toward the farmhouse but never away. The unknown figure holding a lantern near the property at night. The idea that someone may have secretly lived among them before finally attacking. And perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. After slaughtering 6 people, the killer calmly remained inside the farmhouse for days. Feeding animals, eating bread and meat in the kitchen, keeping the fires burning, sleeping beside the corpses, as though Hinterkaifeck had become his home.